Peacemaker tries hard, issue 1, which is Kyle Stark's writing with Steve
Yes.
Pugh on the art.
So Steve Pugh's art, fantastic. Big fan of Pugh. I think he did the Flintstones book with Mark
Mm.
Russell, and he does satire very well. He's very good at expressions. I will say the big problem with this book came from the dialogue, that it is trying way too hard to be James Gunn, and there's
Mm.
only one James Gunn, right? And there's a reason why he gets to go and make these big movies and the Peacemaker show, and he's taking over Superman. Is because that's a skill that's needed to be refined over time, and I don't think Starks has it. The story itself is fine. It's the dialogue from Peacemaker that makes me cringe. It comes out like a bad Deadpool. Kind of tries to be very self-aware. It's almost trying to be the Peacemaker TV show version. And like I can hear John Cena saying this dialogue, but it just comes off as forced. There's not a nuance to it, where you feel like we're very much in on the joke. Here it's almost taking it a little bit too self-serious, or not self-serious, but the, hey, look how edgy we're being, right? And so this story is, he's trying to adjust to being, you know, out of Task Force X because he's been given, his release, and he's trying to adjust back to normal life, but it's hard. So he ends up getting into arguments at the grocery store with people, and that's where he says that he loves peace so much that he'll kill for it, which was a big line from the Suicide Squad. Um, because he shows up in the grocery store in his full costume, and people start making fun of him. Um, and he gets a call from Waller that they need him for a mission, and it's not like supervillains. It's a bunch of essentially domestic terrorists, and it should be just an easy going. Uh, he asks about if the Suicide Squad will be there, and then we get basically some of the movie versions, or maybe even from other Suicide Squad books. But you got Boomerang, Harley, Deadshot, and King Shark.
Is it
Um,
supposed to be like in the same universe as the show?
I don't think it's supposed to be the same universe, but I think it's pulling a lot from there,
Okay.
right? His costume, the way that he's drawn, he very much looks like John Cena. Even the King Shark looks like the King Shark from the movie. Same with the costume on Harley. But Deadshot wasn't in Peacemaker, right? Unless I haven't finished the show, which this did make me want to go back, and I
No,
was enjoying it. I just ran out of time.
yeah, Deadshot
So
wasn't.
no,
Unless he showed up in the last episode, because I not watched that yet. But
gotcha. Also, you haven't finished either. I don't feel as bad. Um, but so basically, Suicide Squad, waves him off because even they don't want to be around him because they're like, yeah, he's a tough hang. It's like the last time we were there, he was showing us his collection of VHS porn, and Waller's like, what the hell? And Harley's like, yeah, it was disgusting even for me. So again, it's trying to play with how edgy it can be. So he goes down and he takes out all of these domestic terrorists. Even like one of them, he recognized from the last ones that he busted up. And while he's there, he comes across the stray dog, and he ends up taking the stray dog. And because of the dog's marking, it looks like he's wearing a tuxedo. And he goes, well, look at that. He's such a fancy little gentleman, kind of like Bruce Wayne. So he names the dog Bruce Wayne. Um, they end up saying that the dog's just a stray, that he doesn't have a name. So he's like, well, then he's not, one of yours. I'm taking him. The police shows up. He has the dog. He starts reminiscing about how his dad wouldn't let him have a dog, because his dad was this big, scary, almost domestic terrorist himself that told him that, you can't trust anything that forms an ideology or forms a loyalty without having an ideology. So we can't have dogs. And so that's all the thing that, Chris, which is Peacemaker's real name, wanted. So he goes home to the trailer, which looks, again, very much like the show. And he gets there, and his parole officer's there. Basically told him that, you gotta be staying the straight and narrow, or else we're gonna be bringing you back. He tries to bond with the parole officer, but even the parole officer's like, no, man, I got stuff to do. And so he leaves him there. Peacemaker goes to buy some dog food from the store and get some other things that he forgot, because there's a subplot here that he's trying to make an instant cake, like with the instant cake mix, and he says that all he needs is water. And even the parole officer's like, no, man, you need oil and eggs. So while he goes out to get the dog food and the oil and eggs, the Brain pops in, which, again, I know this is Black Label, but we're getting a lot of Peacemaker and the Brain with Doom Patrol. And now we're getting Peacemaker and the Brain here, that they stole his dog because they want him, to come see him. And so he shows up, just starts taking out like night guardsmen. And one of them's like, yeah, no, we're not actually night guardsmen. We just work at this water sanitation place. And Peacemaker camouflaged himself with like black water, which is all like sewage. So the guy hoses him off, and he ends up running into Monsieur Malin and the Brain. And basically they said, like, if you want your dog, you have to go and get us some of Deathstroke's DNA. And so, because the Brain wants a new body. So after they back and forth, they argue, Peacemaker ends up, there's a lot of banter in this book. This book could easily be 10 pages shorter if there wasn't a lot of dialogue. So I'm trying to see if there was anything back in here. But yeah, no, it's just Peacemaker essentially telling the Brain, like, well, don't you want the big gorilla? And he's like, oh no, his body couldn't handle my brain and stuff. So it ends with Peacemaker realizing that now he's going to have to face off against Deathstroke. So again, the art is really good. It suffered from that. It's trying too hard to be edgy, which I feel like James Gunn rides that line very well. Of if he tiptoes over it, he brings it back with something else.
Mm-hmm.
And here, there's not a lot of it bringing it back. It's like, yeah, it's great that he has affection for this dog that he just met, and I like all of that. But a lot of his dialogue is, I know we're not supposed to like him, but it's very cringeworthy in thoughts, and a lot of superfluous cussing that just doesn't need to be there. It's almost justified just because it's a Black Label. So I don't know if I'm going to go with issue 2 if I have time next time. So I thought you were reading this too. That's the reason I gave it a go.
I almost did.
Yeah. But lack of sleep, I get it. But I even think this issue would have been too much for you, knowing your taste in things.
Mm.
I know that you don't mind like our hard art action stuff, but sometimes when stuff is being like, oh, look at us, we're using bad language. I'm pretty sure that turns you off as well.